It was never easy to sleep in the African heat, even with winter approaching. Shennick's eyes tracked the fan, lazily cycling in the dusky room as moonlit light cast deep shadows from the window. The Reichskommissar thought of flying under the stars, their light unmarred by clouds. But he did not deserve clear skies, only shadows, all the better to hide in, a coward, a traitor with a false heart, and no conviction. War in Germany, crows fighting for the corpse of the fatherland. War in Africa, a pointless struggle to maintain a pointless system. Failing colonies defended by a shield of SS fanatics and corrupt mercenaries, led by Reichskommissar Schennick, the most despicable of them all. In the sky, he could lose himself, pretend to be a better man, helping the natives, giving them the means of overthrowing the Germans. It was remarkably simple. Nobody audited Sudwestafrika, especially not in these times of civil war. A better man than Schennick would have done this a long time ago. In the distance, the changing of guards. Good lads here to avoid a life of drudgery in Germany. Men worried sick about news from the fatherland. Soldiers who trusted in the Reichskommissar to save them from the South Africans and the Americans. Perhaps it was not too late for Schennick to choose the easy path, trading his consciousness for the men who, like him, served an empty master, a salve to make the pain easier to bear. A decision, grim certitude, as the Reichskommissar began drifting to sleep. No matter the cost, Schennick knew where his heart would lead him in the morning. We're going to attempt to save Angola. Oh, our tree did change. Few know Reichskommissar Wolfgang Schennick's plight, his regret over having murdered thousands of Russian innocents, their faces plaguing his nightmares until he wakes screaming every night for the past decade. Fewer knew his desperation for atonement, only a handful knew his willingness to seek it. Here's the bitter truth. Reichskommissar Schennick's illicit activities have long traversed the tenuous line between disloyalty and treason. Far from Germania's eyes, Schennick seeds the ground for a better Angola. The homeland he envisions bustles with native men, women and children, all living happy and free from the shackles that have long chained them in mines, pits, factories to their death. This is a dream, our dream, for we all must seek forgiveness for sins in which we are complicit. He hopes his actions will ease the mountain of burdens on his soul. This hope we share, as it is one of a dwindling few, keeping many away from the Nurse's sweet promises. We shall build a better tomorrow for this God-forsaken land. Perhaps in doing so we may even save our God-forsaken souls. We're gonna get in contact with the Americans? Oh, they're gonna get suspicious of us. Do we have a new mechanic? The prying eyes. Hutik and Muller can become suspicious that we are not as loyal as we seem. If they both become very suspicious, then we'll attempt to shut down our plan. We cannot let that happen. Okay, right, we're not gonna push. Oh, the African National Congress has risen up. We have met contact with someone just as eager as us in removing all traces of German dominance in Africa. The Central Intelligence Agency, the so-called company, has expressed interest in supporting illicit endeavours. We shall soon meet their emissaries clandestinely to coordinate our next move. Soon, very soon, we'll take great pleasure in wiping the Führer's smile off his features. This blasted war has jeopardised all of our plans. Now we're forced to cooperate with murderers and bloodthirsty criminals, forced to join another senseless war, forced to fly our planes again and again and drop bombs again and again and again and again and again. The promise, remember the promise, yes, remember the faces, that everything we do is for them. Someday, somewhen, merciful rain shall wash the blood off our hands. Then we will walk under the after-storm sun, our heads held high against its piercing gaze. What the war will render unto our souls is immaterial to the opportunities it presents for our weakening our potential enemies. We shall direct surgical strikes against enemy positions and production plants. In flights, our air towers will never deign to record. This time, our hands won't tremble before they open the bomb bays. Okay, right, the African Congress is gone. The meeting has become a success. The CIA's agent has met ours in a secluded location, extending a lucrative offer in exchange for information regarding our so-called brothers in Central Africa and East Africa. They'll give us the help we need to prepare for Angola's liberation. Keeping in constant contact with the Yankees may invite unwanted ire to our actions. However, the Reich's suspicions will only grow with every parcel of information we transmit. By accepting America's help, we risk trapping ourselves atop a frail crystal dome. One misstep will see us in internal freefall towards the failure's bottomless, pitch-black maw, but we'll endure and will achieve what we have promised so long ago to the graves whose corpses we have filled. Their nameless, featureless faces feature prominently in our nightmares. They have not forgotten our adage, and we can only hope they will forgive. Across all fronts of the South African War, the Sudwest Africans have garnered a reputation, not of bold deeds or noble victories, but rather seemingly systematic ineffectiveness. The aid Sudwestafrika is obliged to deliver has, without fail, proved utterly useless. After so many years of cruelty and repression, the people of Angola finally have something of an ally in Reichskommissar Schenek. However, as dedicated as the Reichskommissar may be to righting his many wrongs, the danger of discovery and destruction grows greater every passing day. Muller will turn on us if even the slightest hint of a threat to his chance of profit ever reaches his nose, while what Hutik might do, if he finds evidence to confirm his long-held paranoia, is surely unbearable. If we're able to succeed in liberating the people of Angola, we must act quickly, firmly, and above all, in concert with our allies. The Americans have already been a great help in our liberation project, but for it to have any chance of success, we must bring them in on every level. Soon not only will American spies use Sudwestern bases in order to sabotage the German war effort, they'll also have access to our flight patterns, forewarning of both German fighter and bomber missions, and open assistance in preparing for the handover of the nation to the Angolan liberation forces. The day that the people of the region are finally free from Nazi tyranny draws nearer. Reichskommissar Schenek sat in silence. The savannah heat did little to break the ice that encased his anxious heart. He sat staring at the phone in front of him, waiting for the courage to pick up the earpiece and dial the number he had been given. All the other matters of his office, bar the most urgent, he had delegated to his subordinates. The details were prearranged by a trusted intelligence officer. All he had to do was make the damn call. Battling his nerves, Schenek swiftly dialed the number into the telephone as if there was a race against his own second thoughts. The line connected. "Hello, is this the Southwest African Gulf Oil and Aviation Company?" Schenek said, his voice trembling. "This is Air Schenek. We can go straight to the point." "Hello, Air Schenek," answered a voice after a long silence, soothing Shenek's anxieties. "I'm pleased to hear that you've decided to contact us." Schenek realised at this point that he had committed to something from which he could not turn back. "I will put things simply. I wish to establish a working arrangement between our organisations. Given time, our people could become mutual benefactors. Herr Schenek, your proposal is well received. This will have to be discussed with the board. We'll be in touch." As the man hung up, Schenek wondered if it had all worked. Right, we just got a nice encirclement, but I'm only killing them off because I need to keep this war going until I finish all my stuff. The supply lines of fuel, weapons and ammunition the Shield's frontline demand stretch for thousands of kilometres of arduous, sometimes non-existent roads. By disrupting these networks in the right, we can effectively cripple our brothers' war effort. Shorn of even rations, their soldier performance will decline to below combat capability. Masking our acts of sabotage as enemy raids is trivially easy, and the results will hasten this bloody war's end, in turn minimising civilian losses. Reichskommissar Schenek was, to all outward appearances, a self-assured, confident war hero. In his private office, however, he leaned over his desk, relentlessly tapping his fingers. Cold sweat ran down his face, staring at the phone. Soon, the appointed hour would arrive. A ring cut short as Schenek lifted the receiver, only to drop it with a grunt. "I don't care," he said. "Handle it however you want." His anxiety coated his hands with perspiration. Where were they? He looked at his watch. Just past 6. A ring. "Hello?" Schenek said, his voice barely containing his excitement. "Is this the Southwest African Gulf Oil Company?" A man's voice answered, their American accent on his German palpable enough to throw Schenek off. "Yes, is this Air Schenek? This is about the matter we had discussed yesterday. If not, could you redirect me to him?" "Yes, this is Schenek." "Perfect, this is Lansdale. Shall we continue the talks we held yesterday? Regarding our policy of," the voice trailed away, "closer cooperation." The Fuhrer would kill Schenek for this, but he had no other choice. "Yes, what would you like to talk about?" "Right, we have to wait and see what happens, because if this goes well, we'll be able to work down the middle part. If it doesn't, then we're doomed." Returning to his office after a day of ceremoniously inspecting his pilot, Schenek faced the heap of paperwork that seemed to crush his desk. It was in everyone else's mind, at least from the Southwest African Gulf Oil and Aviation Company. Schenek, however, knew something they didn't. As of a few weeks ago, he had been granted access for the company's technicians to survey his territory. Files wrapped in blue and beige covers seemed to protrude from the pile, cracks jutting out from the mountain's body. Prying one out of the pile, Schenek reviewed the profile of a foreign national, presumably with a fake name. He saw their qualifications, an artificial life before his eyes. John Hopkins, university, bogus degrees, all bound in clean ink and pristine paper. Lies upon lies, fed into the bureaucratic nightmare that he wrestled with daily. Schenek knew better. However, he had started it, and now he was in the eye of the storm. The next step was to chart his way out of it, and his heart faltered at the thought. He picked up his pen. Schenek had only needed to sign a few dozen of them, and let American eyes and ears into the Fuhrer's realm. He had no care for his fame, for his tarnished and bloodied legacy. His hands reached out, not to grasp the the warmth of the furniture, put the shell to what embers that remain. Let the Reich mock him, and the OFN lash him behind his desk. He did not care. With a steady hand, he began to sign. "What I want is guns, Mr. Lansdale," Shinnick said into the phone, steadying his tone. He didn't want to come across as weak. "I don't care if it's state-of-the-art or if it's surplus. The truth here in the Reichskommissariat is that we need weapons. A kernel of truth. Sudwest Africa needed weapons, but not for war. His secret project demanded a constant, ample supply of arms. The African heat did not seem to hold back his chills. "Here, Shinnick," the voice said, even-toned as always. "For America to arm her enemy, even one who decides to cooperate with her, she would need justification." A pause on the other end. "As we all Americans say, friendship is a two-way street. If you're not willing to divulge the purposes of such armaments, then there's only so much I can do to convince the agency's brass to give you what you want. I hope you understand my position here. I'm a liaison, not a... Wow, my days, I don't know how to say that." Shinnick had to be careful. Now was not the time to tell Americans what he had in mind. "Mr. Lansdale, I can guarantee that the usage of such armaments would not be against Americans," Shinnick said, speaking slowly to Masses. "If you need more reassurance, the next time we talk, it would be about American object of interest. We shall discuss oil. I promise I will give you full attention when the time comes." Lansdale did not seem to have a high opinion of him. "I'll bring it up with the agency. We'll be in touch." "So many boxes?" Shinnick asked the secretary. There was a sliver of good news in the morning. American aid had arrived. Naturally, Shinnick masked it as construction materials, giving express orders not to open the cargo. He doubted all of his soldiers shared his intentions. Should Huttig or Muller realise what he had planned, his project would fall in like a house of cards. Despite the calm he projected to his secretary, Shinnick was walking a tightrope. "The manifesto here, sir," the secretary said. Ever faithful and trustworthy, the man had proven himself a source of sorely needed help for Shinnick. It took a moment for Shinnick to remember the young man's name, Wilhelm. "As you can see here and here," Wilhelm said, pointing to the certain lines in the manifest, "the boys have delivered it to the location specified." "Thank you, Wilhelm. I wouldn't know what to do without you." Shinnick smiled. Though Shinnick was a pilot, he admitted that he had no head for numbers. The Reichskommissar of Sudwestafrika would rather delegate what he considered the dull parts of his job to his subordinates, if only all of them were as competent. "If I may ask, sir," Wilhelm said, his voice hesitant, "what is the purpose of all this secrecy?" Shinnick had nothing to tell him. 25% of production, Mr. Lansdale," Shinnick said, fuming. He had let his nerves go out of control. "That is ridiculous. This Reichskommissariat surely cannot grant your request, Mr. Lansdale. It is siphoning off the margins, and then there is outright theft. If the other commissars hear of this, the Fuhrer will have my head in my rank, and you'll have no one to negotiate with." "Here, Shinnick," the voice said, attempting a diplomatic tone. "These are not my terms. Instead, think of it as an exchange." Shinnick's fingers clanked on the table, and his feet became ever more listless. "America entered these clandestine talks with the single aim of aiding you. If you're not inclined to give what she needs within limits, there would be no point in any negotiations. You're reasonable here, Shinnick. An ace, a war hero, America could not have chosen a better partner." Voice paused as if to emphasise its next point. "What she cannot gain through words, she can gain through force. Remember, Mr. Shinnick." "Yes, I understand," Shinnick said, his leverage taken away from him, leaving him deflated and wheezing. "However, surely we can negotiate the rates. 25 is too much." "That's your problem, here, Shinnick. I'm not your friend, and at this stage neither is America. You either agree or you don't, so what it will be?" The Reichskommissar put down his receiver and cracked his fingers and considered his answer. "Yeah, do you know what? 25% is. We need their help." "What exactly do you need again?" Lansdale said, his voice curious. "Please list them for me." Shinnick was again on the phone. The discussion was proceeding smoothly. He had outlined what he wanted, and on the face of it, there were not much. In the long term, however, whatever he had requested would play a key role in his project. Shinnick felt the warmth of the day. Carried by the light of the early afternoon, he had left the windows open. The Reichskommissar's fingers twisted the receiver's wire. He still felt uneasy. "Medical equipment for the most part," he said, trying to sound relaxed and laid back. "Radios, binoculars, backpacks, and rations. No guns. This shouldn't be too difficult, right, Mr. Lansdale? I do not request weaponry." "You're right there, Shinnick." Shinnick's counterpart sounded calm, almost complacent. "This is not too much for America, but ultimately the decision does not lay with me. The president of the agency would decide whether or not to send whatever you need. You understand my position?" "I do." "I'll try to put in a word for you, but only if you let me decide the next topic of discussion. The rich mineral deposits of Southwest Africa, and how the company seeks to use it for the greater good." Shinnick had little choice. "Understood. See you later, Mr. Lansdale." He did not like Lansdale. Perhaps it was for the best. Shinnick shooed two of his men out and closed the door. He was finally alone. The Reichskommissar needed privacy, he told them, and it was an order. They promptly left him alone, free to gaze into the oblong green box that America had clandestinely sent him. Shinnick had forbidden his men from looking inside. Loose lips sunk ships. On his desk was a great treasure. American-made war material, particularly the stuff of dreams. Prying the lid open, he saw what the Americans had sent him. On a bed of hay, to cushion the delivery, he surmised were a binocular, a first aid kit, and a tin box, and a compass, and an MRE package. The binoculars arrested his attention immediately. What would it feel like to look at the world through American lenses? He picked it up, scattering strands of hay, and set it to his eyes. Through the window of his office, the southwest seemed an arid wild land. Close inspection, however, revealed the beauty of its nature. He saw rodents, lions, wildebeest, and many more scurrying around, living lives devoid of any conception of sin and redemption. For himself, there was no such hope. Not anymore. He whispered a cold, empty prayer. He could see it plain as day, written on the walls of his office. German domination here would end, one way or another. He wished peace on whoever would inherit his domain. The presence of our troops at the front line serves no purpose but to draw more blood and prolong this dreadful war. Saving resources for our true ambitions entails sending only the bare minimum of our commitments to South Africa's deserts, just enough to convince Houtig and Muller of our continued, if unwilling, commitment to their murderous plans. This way, we can both keep our men out of the meat grinder. After all, the common soldiery did nothing deserving horrible death in this god-forsaken land, and simultaneously put them to better use keeping order at home, taking care of the villages, hunting bandits, training natives, and organising the institutions necessary for stable, financially independent Angola. So you see, Shennick, Lansdale said, your territory has large deposits of valuable materials, material valuable enough that America would be indebted to you if you grant us special mining rights. First oil, now metal. The Americans seemed determined to wring out all of Sudwestafrika's material wealth. He considered it. His Reichskommissariat was perhaps a minor contribution to the industries of Germany, but if he aroused suspicion, he would not remain where he was for long and remain where he needed to be. Mr. Lansdale said, masking nervousness in his voice with a wheeze, what exact rights do you want? My territory has a lot of metals in it. You have to specify which ones you want. Of course, Shennick had to agree to whatever exchange that occurred, but it helped to know one's enemy. It was half the battle won. Houtig and Muller were unknown factors. Should they learn of his betrayal, they would abandon him in an instant. He had to be careful. To tungsten, chromium, and everything you can sell besides. Do not worry, Herr Shennick. Lansdale lowered his voice. We would pay fairly for it. America never forgets her friends. Give us what we want today, and both the present agency would note your cooperation. Shennick sat back, considering his answer. We're going to give them the rights. Are you insane, Herr Shennick? Lansdale's voice was almost hysterical. You want me to request the President of the United States to send advisors to train his enemy's armies? I am convinced that you must have taken leave of your mental facilities. There's simply no way. I say this as an experienced operator. For me to persuade the agency to do this, I'm sorry, but I must cut this conference short. Please wait, Mr. Lansdale, Shennick said. Will you not please at least try, on my accounts? My Reichskommissar has one thing to offer. Its great treasure and most prized possession. Listen, Miss Lansdale. You would not lose anything by trying, wouldn't you? Just ask. At the outset of his career in German aviation, Shennick never expected to ask for favours from an American political operator, yet here he was, consorting with traitors to his fatherland. Fine, Lansdale said, his tone curt. Have it your way. I should warn you that I shall put it to the agency, and therefore the President, in the bluntest way possible. I apologise, Herr Shennick, but I am as loyal to my country as you are as yours. The line cut. It was the riskiest gamble that Shennick had taken. Perhaps it would pay off, perhaps it would not. Only time will tell. A fresh set of faces. The unthinkable had happened. America had offered its personnel to the Reichskommissar's cause. On Shennick's desk was an explosion of colour. Crucial information as who would aid Shennick in reforming and retraining his army. Shennick felt happy, and the first time in a long time he even hummed a little song or two while he wrote over the recommendations. These men would enter as mercenaries, foreign nationalists that Shennick had hired to train his army. In reality, however, they were Americans. All the paperwork that laid before him was an excuse to let them in. Muller and Houtig would not suspect a thing. They would perhaps even welcome his overventures to make it a more competent elite land force. Shennick did not intend such a thing. The Americans and the Germans were the enemies of his secret project, and both think Shennick their useful puppet. Oh, how wrong they were. In a momentous occasion, for a time, the veil of darkness that had descended upon Shennick since his first days as Reichskommissariat was lifted. A stroke of lightning and luck had banished the shadows. They would return, but for now Shennick would rather enjoy the moment, for his project had gone according to plan, so we've gained American advisors. Surely you jest, Herr Lansdale. Shennick closed his eyes. He loathed the phone talks with his new best friend. Lansdale lightly assented German pickup. I do not joke, Herr Shennick. The cost of our continued interactions in the region necessitate profound guarantees. Shennick closed his eyes, opened them again. The Americans had him by the balls, negotiating high treason for not something he had much experience in. Focus. He had to stay composed. Back of the envelope calculations show you require 25% of Angolan industrial output, more than 40% of critical steel production. We don't make these requests lightly, nor do we aim to waste your time here, Shennick. Our continued partnership is of great risk to the American nation, to the career of several men in the African continent. Our lawyers can spin up another web of consortiums and private interests to obscure the transfer. If you'd like, some money can be kicked back to you personally. Despite the desperate situation, Reichskommissar smiled. Personal payment? The Americans still imagined him a corrupt traitor. That was good. Misdirection was the only lifeline he had left. He stepped away from his desk and walked to the window. How he had longed to be in the skies again. Nothing is ever simple. We're going to keep going with the Americans. I'm in this deep now. I'm sorry, Herr Schenck. You want what? Explained the familiar voice from the speaker as the Reichskommissar tapped his foot. To the telephone, Schenck whispered, Mr. Lansdale, you have heard my request. The South African Gulf Oil and Aviation Company must provide certain guarantees for our constituents within the area. Schenck wondered if he was felt with either a modicum of satisfaction or mere heat from anxiety. Sudwestafrika has complied with our terms so far. However, guarantees from Sudwestafrika are not what I want. I must ask that the company extend such to Angola instead. Moments of breathing before Lansdale finally spoke. The secret project that you mentioned, Herr Schenck. The Reichskommissar answered with silent buzzing noise, plunged doubt, worry and anxiety deep into his mind. The company had not expected this. The agent paused as if in thought. Deviation from our contract, not necessarily out of our reach, mine nor the President's, but beforehand there will be repercussions, ones neither you nor we are prepared to handle. We will keep in touch soon, Herr Schenck. I hope so, Schenck replied. The eardrum splitting static, the Reichskommissar stepped away from his desk, littered with paperwork from the past few deals, and turned towards the savannah beyond his office window. Huttig and Muller hid just behind the horizon, true, but all he saw there were Angolans' faces spread out like a happy mosaic against the blue wind-husked sky. Reichskommissar Wolfgang Schneck paced about his office, in turns bathing by the warmth of the African sun through his windows and shivering in the frigid shadows of the demons that lay inside his wounded soul. His past came rushing in, all the men that he had been responsible for shooting down, the weight of having helped build slavery and barbarism worldwide. He rushed to his desk drawer to take a few pills and down them with hot water on his desk. The words of the news report that had arrived on his desk continued to scratch their way through the man's mind. Words such as the United States, inability to afford such a crisis, other means of support in the programme, and the most harrowing of all, for Schneck, no. Desperate, he tried to find a way out of the disappointment and darkness that had consumed him, yet whenever he turned he simply found greater points of sadness. Trying to find relief, Schenck opened the drawer he hadn't opened in months. The one contained the beautiful jewelled necklace that Angolan woman had worn, the one whose body he found in the dirt road of our village, torn to shreds by one of his air squadrons. Walking in his office, he looked at the necklace, studying it for all of its beauty, representing Angola itself. Schenck began to assault the wall of his office, punching it over and over again with fists clutching the necklace. Once his knuckles were bruised and bloody, he opened his palm, looking at the dripping blood. He would have bled for the Angolans. He would have to bleed for the Angolans, especially if the Americans would not help him. Have you gotten the documents, Reichskommissar? Asked the American on the other end. I believe it has the terms you agreed upon for the deal. I have, Herr Lansdale. I am very happy to close this deal, said Schenck. In truth, he wasn't really happy. At least not as much as he should have been. It was a pleasure doing business with you, he said, lying again. That's good to hear, said Lansdale, probably doubting the last part of Schenck's statement. However, he would like to move on to particulars of the arrangement. I'd like to know if the Southwest African Gulf Oil Company would be able to work with some more minor local groups that we could subtract to help us operate in the region. Do you have any in mind? Anyone who would be able to work with us? Schenck smiled. I know a group of individuals who might be able to work with you, Herr Lansdale. I will inform one Jonas Savimbi to expect a call from you shortly. I'm sure he will be pleased to discuss your plans for development. I'm sure he would, Reichskommissar. We can work with you to develop a plan for the future of Sudwestafrika. We can attend to this matter now that we have a deal in place. Oh, it did end favourably. I thought it was not going to happen. Do I want to do this? Currently, we're still trying to go behind their backs. I'm curious to see what happens if we accept this. Okay, ceasefire is now in effect. End of the South African War. As best as anyone could tell, Schenck was a loyal servant of the Reich as any other. Perhaps not the most dedicated leader or meticulous administrator, but nothing to worry about. In truth, Schenck had long since abandoned all faith in the Reich he had served for so long. One dark night found him upon his balcony, trembling with fear and nerves as a small car wound its way up to his estate. Upon its arrival, 3 well-armed figures emerged from within the cab, along with a 4th from the trunk. He was tall, blonde, and spoke German with only the faintest trace of an accent. Schenck greeted him as Special Agent Reynolds, shaking his hands, promising the support of himself and those he could trust within the administration. The plan was simple. Using Sudwestafrika as a base, the CIA would begin covert operations to infiltrate and destroy the German operational structure within the region. The Americans would win the war. In time, the Africans would receive their liberty, independence, and the democracy they deserved. And then Wolfgang Schneck would die knowing he was not an evil man. Oh, okay, we can't have the war end or Shenik gets killed off by Huttig. No ceasefire is going to be accepted. We're fighting on, or we can actually offer the ceasefire ourselves, but we will not be doing that. Stage is set for the grand finale. Hundreds of CIA agents have been disseminated throughout German Africa, eagerly working to bring down this clay-footed Goliath. We shall provide them with whatever they need, and we shall do so gladly. From now on, every resource of our Reichskommissariat shall be devoted to our true mission, this land's freedom. Let our enemies know the fear and despair we'll have suffered for far too long. We saw it in each other's faces, we saw it on poor Wolfgang, and we felt it ourselves. We dared not hope for fear of being proven wrong, but the Reichskommissar's eye bags have fled just as we can now sleep without feeling thorny vines strangling our hearts and souls. How long has it been since we have last felt true peace? We have done what we could, and now we enter our plan's final stage with a clear conscience and a renewed willingness to lay our very souls on the line. Never mind the deaths we risk for the Angolan people's freedoms, or the shallow ditches that mark our failures. We are at peace now, and that is what matters most. Put bluntly, most parts of the Angolan plan were logistical in nature, dangerous to be sure, but mundane at heart. But the question of good government, of the simple yet impossible questions, these were the stuff of dreams and lofty ideals which Shenik had lost years ago. A strong man or strong institutions, unity or liberty. Shenik's decision tonight could set the precedents for all other leaders in Africa to follow. But the natives will not have the luxury of Americans 2 centuries ago. 2 oceans, few enemies, and endless time to discuss and debate with their new countrymen. A weary man who desired redemption and absolution, who wished to no longer see a country bound up in its chains of servitude, he would have to do. It would be possible to call a meeting of dissidents to draft the constitution, but it would take considerable misdirection and concealment just to hide the meetings. Alternative Shenik's men could do the majority of the work while briefing some hardy ex-revolutionaries in their cells, telling them to stick to the plan. It was not the most ideal situation, but better than gambling too much and losing it all. Shenik reached for the folder of The Dreamers Awoken at Last, carrying the torch of freedom. Shenik had believed that deep down in the hearts of all men burned the desire to be free, but in his experience many were content to plough the fields, to suffer servitude in exchange for peace. That made those willing to speak out for freedom all the bolder, landing them a place in the folder in Shenik's hand and in his presence. The question was how many should be released to ensure a strong Angola. Any option taken would need to account for much suspicion it would raise from Huttig. There would be the new names in the prison rolls, new identities for the released prisoners, but time was of the essence. The more prisoners would be freed, the more difficult it would become to release them all unnoticed. Some would have to be released no matter the cost. They had the essential skills and education that would be vital to the new government. Others weren't essential, but would undoubtedly be useful. Then there was the craziest idea of them all. Just free them all. It would, Shenik reflected, save him the burden of choosing who to free. And it would free him from the guilt of knowing that in him choosing to free some, he would condemn others to waste away for longer. After mulling it over, Shenik thought it would be best to... I'm going to free them all. Dr. Savimbi drove to the Reichskommissar's office, summoned for a checkup. It was a flu, he said, that could be contagious, hence the house call. With his doctor's coat and the Reichskommissar's invitation in hand, he passed through security without issue. When he entered Shenik's office, Dr. Savimbi promptly removed his doctor's coat. There was no flu here, only a table littered with identical satchel bags, containing matching manila envelopes. As soon as you authorise this operation, these satchels will go out to every single freedom fighter that we know of, Shenik said. If your men follow your instructions, then these forged papers will get your fighters through any checkpoint in the Reichskommissariat as they prepare for the uprising. They are made with the same paper and methods used for all official documents. Savimbi held one up to the light to see the Reichshandler shining through and nodding approval. Huttig will be suspicious, even if the documents seemed real. Given the number of people crossing the borders, it would not be a problem to hand all these satchels out, but if you want to minimise suspicion, we have a few drop-off points that would be safer, even if it restricts the uprising. Oh, well, you've just got to do the last option. Let's raise up some real hell. Send them all out. To make the Angolan plan a reality, Angola had to be stabilised and the logistics for its new beginning needed to be set up before any other components were laid down. There was, of course, the matter of war. Any material used for anything other than the war effort would be scrutinised by the other Reichskommissariats, and the German civil war could not last forever. Should the victor intervene in the blasted war, which they are, then there would be double the scrutiny. Anything they did would need to be covered up fast. Shenik furrowed his brow. He knew some men who could be trusted to handle the more sensitive parts of the plan, and how suspicious would Muller get? He would mostly be distracted by the war, but Afrika-Schild would permit Muller access to Sudwestafrika. If he realised that supplies were used to merely stabilise Angola, he might get suspicious that we aren't trying our best to win the war. Yeah, okay, it's going to be Muller's suspicion going up with the side of the tree, isn't it? Schenck stared at the industrial blueprints, the first of many to ensure the future of the new Angola. Ideally, what industrial base Angola had would be used to further industrialise, to build the backbone of a new Angolan economy. Unfortunately, it was also a problem with war. Military factories were busy churning out guns, planes, ammo and everything else for the war effort. Civilian industries were at capacity trying to maintain the facade of normality, on top of repairing the infrastructure damage caused by either American bombers or insurgent bombings in the countryside. There was no easy solutions, Schenck mused. The factories had to supply the war to keep the Americans from overrunning Angola. Without a post-war industry capable of supplying the natives in a post-war struggle for freedom, the Angolan plan would be doomed from the start. Perhaps there was a compromise that would benefit both of Schenck's objectives, while risking failures at both. Angola can only maintain its independence with a strong economy, therefore we must invest heavily in it. Yes, we shall. Whenever Schenck read the reports, glancing over the estimated militia strength, he could not help but notice that his light hand had actually made them more complacent in their bid for freedom. It would be an oversight to say that they were competent fighters, and for their own good, this could not continue. Schenck dusted off the plans dispatched from the garrison of remote villages, not as a garrison, but as a nativizing training force, quietly preparing them for the day that they would stand alone. Perhaps they would not have the most advanced weapons, but they would not need them if he trained them right. They would fight dirty, with guerrilla tactics and unconventional strategies, bleeding their many enemies dry, whether they be American or German. This would not go unnoticed. Hudik in particular would be more than annoyed. His suspicions would be piqued. If the men are not ferried towards the front line, he might question what exactly is so pressing on the Sudwest African home front to demand so many troops. Schenck shuddered. For a moment, he wondered Hudik already knew what was going on in these rooms from some rat or erstwhile spy. For now, Hudik had his hands full with war, but Schenck knew he couldn't push his luck. The madman could make a move before the war is over, and the failure of Schenck's plans would leave Angola in a worse place than when he arrived. His suspicions are going to increase a lot, but yet we need them to be ready to face an enemy. As Schenck looks at the latest security reports, he ponders his next move. His plans are moving quickly towards completion. Now all he needs is to allow the independence movements to take control of the territory in a final push, but for that they need time and space to gather the men and the roads and factories to move and supply them. To address this fundamental issue, his mind already has a solution. He will order the garrison to stop protecting the villages from the rebels, and stop the patrols that regularly keep vigil over the roads and highways. This way the rebels will slowly take over and extend their control over Angola. As soon as that happens, more and more will join the freedom fighters, further strengthening their cause. However, this option is not free from risk. The other Reichskommissars will surely notice the empty garrisons and unguarded roads, and this will greatly increase their suspicions about our conduct. If he truly is to make his move, he'll need to be prepared for everything, especially for the worst. The choices are straightforward: move fast, move carefully, or try to find a balance between the two, all centered on a deadly balance, a stronger Angola or a less suspicious uprising. Time to decide. Natives will be pleased to control their own villages again, but Germany will be extremely suspicious of our actions. Oh, we don't care, we'll solve that. Everything is now in place, a provisional government ready to chart their new nation's course, a native army ready to defend against any would-be overlord, and the foundations of infrastructure and economy which would not need to rely on death and slavery for subsistence. We are now ready to cut the last threads keeping this cursed charade together. With the help of the CIA and the native resistance, we can ensure a quick and bloodyless transition to native rule, even as the Reichskommissariat itself will be struck by simultaneous attacks both within and without. The end is near. Freedom lies just beyond their fingertips, coated in mana. The moment has come. Wolfgang Schenck has announced to us his intention to dissolve this monster they call the Reichskommissariat. Through our painstakingly established channels will he declare the Angola and Namibian people's freedom from the German yoke, rousing our native brothers to arms. The man himself has earned his salvation, and will soon exchange our lands and its memories for a normal man's life. We, on the other hand, shall remain to man the new front lines ourselves, veterans of 1,000 battles both on the battlefield and within our recesses. We stand ready with our venerable warplanes for one last glorious flight. O venerable Cleo, remember our sacrifice as we take our bow. Let our deeds gently fade into twilight, or let them shine in your annals as proof of evil men's redemptions. We leave the choice to you. The cage is no more. Blood-soaked flowers have grasped the spars and broken free. We are ready to face our ultimate war with a smile. Onwards, for freedom. The bomber looks like all the others in Sudwestafrika, an instrument of death ready to unleash destruction upon all those unfortunate enough to find themselves under its shadow. The pilot and his native assistant walk towards it, the German ready to depart towards his intended target to fulfill its oath-sworn duties to the Heimat. No, this is not how it is. It is instead Wolfgang Schenck pacing towards the aircraft No, this is not how it is. It is instead Wolfgang Schenck pacing towards the aircraft beside Jonas Savimbi, ready for his last fight as Reichskommissar von Sudwestafrika. The Angolan rebel remains torn over his opinions of the man, a stupendous pilot, sensitive, sentimental perhaps, but the Angola plan seems unlike him even now. The German halts just before entering the cockpit and turns towards his rebel acquaintance, a beat passed before he musters his voice. I suppose there's not much else to say. Savimbi shakes his head. No, there isn't a lot of things to do still. Safe travels. Of course. Schenck nods. Good luck. The German extends a hand. The Angolan shakes it with a small smile, eyes intense and eager. Without a word, Schenck boards the plane and adjusts his cockpit controls. Air tower bursts the go-ahead while he dons his goggles and checks the panels. The engine splutters to life, and he prepares to take off. Schenck hands throttle the lever to take off like he has so many times before. This experience felt different somehow. His gloves creased a smile as the landing gear parted with the earth. All those sleepless nights, those endless worries, his countless attempts at misdirection and subterfuge, were they worth it? His answer comes deep from his belly, a strange, unfamiliar sound. The sound of laughter. The only issue is we're now at war with both South Africa and the Afrika-Schild, so I don't know how that's really going to work out for us. Oh, Namibia is back under the control of the Afrika-Schild. Okay, that's not ideal. I don't know how we're going to win this. Oh, Namibia has fallen. I would prefer it if we didn't actually have to fight the South Africans. Oh, they've formed into one nation now. Okay, South Africa, please can we peace out? We're fighting the same enemy here. Oh, there's now re-encirclement of troops. Now, we don't exactly control all of Angola currently, so might have to push them back. See if that way we can like force a peace deal with South Africa. Just trying hard to catch these Americans. Oh, going for a re-encirclement over here. Right, our next issue is going to be manpower. So that's it. We just get reduced to an American puppet. What? Well, guys, that's where I'm going to leave it. There's nothing else for us to do now. We done something I did not expect us to be doing today. I did not think that Schenck could actually escape with his life. So who knows where he's disappeared off to. Angola, I guess, is not really free how I was really envisioning it going. We were actually winning, which is the sad thing there. We're actually doing pretty good, considering I managed to get this many divisions out. But yeah, anyways, thoroughly enjoyable. 1 down, 2 to go. Obviously leaving the craziest one to last, but we'll be in Central Africa on Wednesday. So until then, guys, do take care. Sure, bye. Then now.